lighting the effigy.
We're all special!
Now it's like we're all part of it.
This is more like it.
Burning people!
This is democracy personified. Me! How do you suppose this happened anyway?
I think it was arson. No, it was my son.
Well, hey there, Indy, turn your dial. Dapper Don's here to make you smile with a co-host sharp and riff so true. We've got the laughs, the rants, the view. What's going on? Oh, what's the word? Indy's the city where we'll be heard. From Monument Circle to Broad Ripple on. What's going on with Dapper Don? So grab your coffee, Hoosiers, and let's get to it. 'Cause we're in the house!
What's going on? It's Dapper Don, and I'm excited to welcome you all back. What does it take to be truly free? What does it take to be completely comfortable with who you are and to have the courage to share it with the world? Last week, we talked about one aspect of it, the process of rebuilding your identity. This week, I think it's only fair to follow it up with talking about how you find your people and how you develop a community around your new identity. That way, no one will ever be able to tell you who you are again. Tonight's guest is a prime example of this, having gone to do the Burning Man event over 20 times, each time leaving an indelible mark on her psyche. Not only that, but she's someone who's deeply in tune with the spiritual aspects of freeing yourself, having studied martial arts, yoga, and dance, as well as communing with nature in a quiet, grounding way. She's an intensely curious novelist whose curiosity has carried her around the world. If that ain't freedom, I don't know what is. Introducing author Sarah Marshall. Say hi to the people, Sarah.
Hello, folks, and it's a real pleasure to be here, Dapper Don.
Absolutely. It's very nice to meet you. So, to start, tell us a little bit about yourself. What kind of environment did you grow up in, and how did that shape your sense of self?
Reaching all the way back. So I have a strange upbringing that has me kind of in between worlds. I was born in Hawaii, and then from young, migrated to the continental United States, went east into the Sierra Nevadas and in a small rural town, and mostly grew up in that small rural town. But I also, during my childhood, spent quite a bit of time on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation where a number of my relatives lived. So I had this really unique upbringing that was quite rural, very connected to Native folks, both in Hawaii and in the U.S. And so I was experiencing life in parallel because I lived in a largely white community, but I also had this very Native experience as well. And grew up until I left home after I graduated from high school, and I traveled around the United States and Canada, just going from place to place till I ended up broke in South Dakota digging ditches, and I joined the Navy. And I spent 6 years in the Navy, went to college, ended up in the tech world, and have spent the largest part of my adult life out here in California, while, I had quite a bit of experience in the Midwest as well.
That's an adventurous life if I've ever heard one. So, to make sure I got my timeline straight, we go from Hawaii to Nevada to a Native American reservation, all the way up to digging ditches, joining the Navy. That is a lot. And I imagine that you had to take on many identities and wear many hats. How did that kind of affect you?
So interesting that you asked that. Nobody's asked me that question, but you're right. Most interestingly, because I realized from when I was very young, like when I was 4 years old, that I was trans. I didn't know what the word was, but I knew I was a girl growing up. And I also knew it wasn't okay. I grew up in a time that was where it was very conservative. It wasn't okay to be that. And so I was deeply in the closet, and all the adventures I had up into my early adult life were all trying to sublimate that until I could no longer live with it and had to transition. So I spent a whole youth putting on the coat of something that I really wasn't. That wasn't my identity. And wearing that coat very well so I could be successful in life, but I was completely miserable inside. And it took till my mid-30s to take off that coat and actually be myself.
So tell me, what was that? Was that misery coming from the fact that the way you were living was conflicting with your values? Or was it coming from the fact that being around so many conservative people, they made that sort of thing seem like it was, to put it bluntly, a ticket to hell? Or was it kind of both?
I would say mostly it was, I was miserable because I wasn't being my true self. I was being what society wanted me to be. I was definitely successful at doing that. There's a lot of mythology around trans people being failed at being male or being whatever their original gender is, and so they try to go be successful in the other gender. That is absolutely not the truth. I was quite successful as what appeared to be a white man, but I was completely at odds with who I really knew I was. And until I got right with that, I was absolutely miserable. Now, the reason why I did that for so long is because it wasn't okay. And it wasn't just because of, a set of conservative people. It just wasn't, when I was young, it wasn't even a conversation. It wasn't even a thing. So I was something that was so far beyond what most people could think about that they just couldn't understand it. And being trans is the biggest transgression you can take, from being, from not being, from what people see as your biological destiny. So it was such a transgressive move, and in a period of time in the world when that wasn't even a conversation, let alone something that could be accepted.
And yeah, you couldn't be more right about that, because just thinking about the 70s, 80s, and 90s, that stuff was starting to come around. It was still very, very hard for a lot of people to accept, and so many experienced so much unnecessary bullying from both family and their environment, school, teachers, everybody, for something that, honestly, I didn't really think it would be that. I don't know. I don't think it's that surprising. It's like people acted like it was an affront to God. It's like, this is something that humans having the ability to shape who they are and shape their sense of self is exactly what makes us human.
If you listen to the propaganda about trans people today, because we're certainly a lightning rod, you would think we were the, monsters crawling from the deep that are predatory in nature. And by and large, most of the trans people I know are, whether they're emotionally healthy or not, they're just trying to get through the day. It's funny, I hear about the bathroom thing, and I think the only thing I want to do in the bathroom is do my business and get out of there. I don't, that's not a place I want to hang out. So it's funny to hear the dialogue about it when my lived experience is very different.
Absolutely. And, with the whole bathroom thing, I'm glad you brought that up, because, I'll just say this, right? Whether somebody is trans or not is not indicative of their character. A pervert is a pervert, whether they are identifying as their gender or whether they transition. So the real argument there is, why are so many perverts going unchecked? Not why are trans people in certain bathrooms. For me, it's
right.
A neutral space.
I think it's an easy projection to make if you're not trans. If you're a straight white guy, you're going to think like a straight white guy and assume that that's where people are at. It's really difficult to crawl inside the trans experience if you're not that. So I try to make it easy to for people to talk about. It's like if you're expressing some deeply held part of yourself that you're afraid of what the world is going to think, it doesn't have to be trans. It can be whatever it is. There are consequences for actually showing that. If you're going to be different from the norm and show yourself as the true authentic person you are, there's going to be benefits. The benefits for me was I could actually live with myself and enjoy who I was. But there are consequences as well. And the consequences are often, if you're not like everybody else, you're going to get a lot of resistance.
Absolutely. So when you transitioned, like when you finally decided, you know what, screw this, I'm not doing this pretending thing anymore, what was that feeling? Was there anger? Was there a sense of peace? Was there fear?
Definitely fear. The rage that I felt was the thing that propelled me through my youth and up into my early adulthood. All those things that I did, the military, the martial arts, et cetera, going to engineering school, that was rage fuel. I did all those things to kind of get rid of that rage that I constantly felt. When I transitioned, the flame of that rage dissipated. But then I had to deal with first how people were reacting to me as I went through transition and came out to people, and then figuring out how to live a life on, in essence, Main Street and deal with the good and the bad and the really bad as I was just being myself. So there was a lot of fear. When I transitioned, there was no choice. If I hadn't transitioned, I would have died. I would have, not necessarily committed suicide, but I would have done something that would have killed me. So transitioning saved my life, but I was pretty unstable for several years. And what I mean by unstable was I was still trying to figure out who I was, because I had spent so much time creating an identity for myself that wasn't real. And I had to kind of respin myself and figure out who I really was. So if I'm trans and I'm being myself, what does that actually mean for me? And my identity, how I present myself, who I'm in relationship with, what community I surround myself with. I was really struggled through that for the first several years.
And it's very interesting because there is a lot of unknowns that you navigate. I mean, when you rebuild yourself, you have to start damn near from scratch. And one of the things that makes that process hard is when you're facing like oppression in your external environment. So how did you overcome the thoughts and feelings of others in this process?
Poorly at first, and then over time. The really interesting thing that happened to me, and when we get to talking about Burning Man, the Burning Man experience is really what solidified this, is I unconsciously, after I transitioned, had my trans identity kind of in front of me everywhere. So it was between me and being connected to other people, because I had definitely ingested enough transphobia that I was living with internalized transphobia enough that I had it, that I didn't fit anywhere and I couldn't be truly connected to other people because I was so othered. I had to work through that. And Burning Man is the inflection point in which I really saw what that was doing to me and what could be possible if I would put that identity down.
Absolutely. And yeah, I actually do want to talk a little bit about Burning Man, because I'm very curious as to your experience. I've never been. I've heard of the event, but then like I know that there's a thing that you're not supposed to post about it too much. So I had like heard about the event in the early 2000s and then nothing else ever since like COVID. So what drove you to go to Burning Man for the first time?
So it was something I had heard of. It was on my list, but it was low on my list. I wasn't really planning on going anytime soon. And in the early 2000s, I had two separate groups. I had started hanging out with a group of friends, and they were trying to talk me into going to Burning Man. And then I was also on a political action committee in San Francisco, and one of the supervisors, aide de camp, became a close friend of mine, and he wanted me to go. And he was part of a 300 strong group of gay men. And so both of these groups were pushing me hard to go. And I felt like it was a moment of kismet that if I had these two separate groups trying to get me to go, there must be some reason. This must be the time I need to go. So it wasn't that I was excited about going as much as, because I was still dealing with all my crap. And so I only went because I was having this kind of message that I should go. And even when I went out with the gay boys. I had a whole set of rationale for doing it, but I was afraid to get closer to this other group of people because I saw them as basically straight and basically that I was a novelty in that group. And so I went out there and I was doing exactly what I did in the rest of my life, which is staying on the fringes of community, never quite landing anywhere and never letting anybody close to me. And that's not a great place to be when you go out to an event like Burning Man. And it shouldn't be a mystery. And part of me writing this novel that I wrote was to give the reader a sense of what it's really like to be at Burning Man on the ground. Not the spectacle necessarily, not the big party stuff, but what actually is your life like when you're at Burning Man. And I certainly ported a whole lot of my experiences and a lot of people that I've met, etc., into a fictionalized version of what it's like to be out there.
And that is honestly, I think, very valuable because, again, something that I imagine that not many people have experienced, being able to be translated effectively into a novel form like that creates a level of understanding and actually can build the community a lot more than spectacle online posts.
Yeah, the theme of the book is belonging. And what I wanted to explore in that book is what is it like to go out to this place of created community, of a temporary city, of created community, and not have a healthy relationship with belonging, and how various kinds of people from various kinds of lives will deal with that dysfunction in terms of being in community. So that was the theme of the book that I explored.
Absolutely. And I want to talk a little bit about your experience. So your first experience, from the time that you got there to the time that left, kind of what are some highlights of that adventure?
Yeah, and one of my characters in the book has a highly fictionalized version of it, much more dramatic. But the beats for me were I got out to this crazy place that's in an intense environment as it is, because it's in the Black Rock Desert, which is one of the most remote deserts in the United States. It's in northeast Nevada, and it is 100-mile long strip of alkali lake bed. It's hard, it's dried out hard. And there's nothing there. There's no weeds. There's no animals. There's nothing out there except for what people bring out there. And this city, this experimental city that was at that time 18,000 people, it's now 80,000 people, comes out and builds a city and lives in that city for a bit over a week and has these intense experiences. So I got out there. I was very buttoned down from my past. I was this very buttoned down person with this image of being this, very put together guy. Then I transitioned and I was going through the process of what it would mean for me to be a person in the world as a trans woman. And then I landed on the ground out there and I was just my first 3 days, my mouth was open. And then I went through this period of intense loneliness. I just didn't feel like I fit. I didn't feel like I was very connected with folks. And the reason was, as I realized, several days into the event, was here's 18,000 people out there being really connected, being really great with each other. And I was keeping myself separate from everybody because I was wearing my trans identity between me and everybody else. And there's a couple of critical things about Burning Man that makes it Burning Man. There's 10 principles, but there's a couple that really stood out that really were challenging to me. The first was the gift economy. And what that means is there's no buying, selling, or bartering. There's just giving things away. So you go out there with everything that you need to take care of yourself, plus something extra. And some people bring trinkets or provide services or band together and build a camp or a village to do some amazing service to the public. But everything is free. It's a contribution. So that gift economy means if you or I were walking down the street in our local city, I live in Oakland, I was walking down the street in Oakland and somebody offered me something for free, I'd be really suspicious. it was the norm out at Burning Man to have to get something free, to be somebody to gift you something. So it immediately knocked down the social barriers, and you were suddenly deeply and intimately connected with people in incredible immediacy. And so that was threatening to me because people were connecting with me and being friendly, et cetera, et cetera. And then the other thing was participation. Is you're not out there as an observer going to events and watching them. You are part of the action. So whatever is happening out there, you're going to get pulled into it. And about 90% of everything that happens out there is spontaneous. So you never know what you're going to get pulled into. And for somebody that's really buttoned down and wanting to be wallpaper, that is a super threatening environment. And also, me being trans was the least interesting thing for people. So I suddenly had this identity in front of me that didn't make any difference out there. So I was putting up this barrier with people that made no sense. And that's the thing I had to deal with while I was out at Burning Man.
So 2 questions from that. First off, you never know what's going to... Did you get pulled into an orgy? Is that one of those things that happened there?
So I never got pulled into an orgy. I mean, it's not that it's not possible. It's certainly you could have, but you have very much you have agency to titrate in or titrate out of whatever you want to. If you want to spend your entire time out there communing with art and silence, you could do that. If you want to be in the party part of it, you could do that as well. If you just want to hang out with community, you can do that. All those are possible. But that's not what it was for me. It was that I had, like I said, I had this thing that this group of people that really cared about me were treating me as a novelty. And the thing that I had to get through, the knothole that I had to get through, was grappling with this identity that I was putting between me and other people and letting it down. It's sort of like the scarecrow finally puts its arms down and lets the animals in. I had to put my arms down and let the community that wanted to love me. And as soon as I did, I was completely connected.
Absolutely. And sort of tell me, my second question was, what was something concrete that you ended up learning that first time that kind of kept you going back?
Well, it was my whole thing was that I was different and I was apart from community, and so I always kept myself on the outskirts. I maintained independency. I wouldn't really get close to folks. That was kind of my deal. So the minute I put my arms down and let people in, I remember driving off the Playa that year, and I gave a guy a ride out when I was driving out. And I remember saying to him as I was driving out, well, I think I'm finally ready to be at Burning Man. And what that really was is I finally put down this identity thing that I was putting in the way between me and other people and let myself be in community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And do you think that this chosen family that's been able to lower your walls and that's been able to really bring you into the fold and make it so that you feel like you're part of this community, do you think that can be stronger than blood family? And if so, why?
It depends. I think it would depend on your family. My family ranged from queasy to we'll deal with it. One of my brothers wouldn't really talk to me for 2 years and then completely flipped, and now he's one of my greatest advocates. He's a really great guy. So I had a healthy relationship with my family, and I still do for the ones that are still alive. But my chosen community provides something different. We vibrate on the same frequencies. We have similar interests, and we enjoy sharing those interests together. We are actively creating a place to be accepted with each other. So that first year, that little community of 14 people that I was connected to out there, we eventually built a village that has ranged from 60 to 300 people depending on the year. And I've literally camped with thousands of people over the year. Over 25 years, I've camped with thousands of people because we have people coming in, people going out, etc. So that experience gets propagated through a very wide-ranging community that really lives all over the world.
And tell me, what does the why is it called Burning Man? Is there a significance to that?
Yes. So back in the it's the early 90s, an artist was, as I understand it, he was going through a breakup, and he built this man to burn. He didn't really assign a purpose for it, but he built this man to burn, went out to Baker Beach and burnt the man. And the next year, more people showed up, until the third year it got to be so big that they were kicked out of San Francisco and they needed some place to go. So around that time, there was a group called the Cacophony Society, and they would basically go out to the Black Rock Desert where nothing was, and they would blow things up and do all kinds of chaotic, crazy stuff. So that artist took that burn out to Burning Man, and over the years, it's grown from just this wild and crazy event to this kind of established, civilized with at least a street grid and such, and become this major event. And I think it's because it lives on these 10 principles that it's unique to anything else that's anywhere in the world.
And honestly, that kind of makes sense, because especially when you brought up the breakup, there's this, from what I understand, this idea of kind of letting who you were before kind of turn to ash in the wind, right? But in order for that to happen, something has to burn. So in what way were you kind of feeling the burn there?
Great question. So first of all, Burning Man it's a temporary city, and it's at no time is it ever stable. Things are getting built, things are getting torn apart, things are burning, etc. So you're in this environment that you're never there's never a stable moment. It's ethereal. It's there for 8 days and then it disappears. And so there's this definite psychological demand that you make yourself present to whatever's happening right now, because in the next minute that might shift away. And it develops a practice. I remember the first year I left and I was like, wow, I kind of missed Burning Man because I was so busy being in my head. And so I was kind of chasing that dragon when I went out to Burning Man the next year. And what I came to realize is that cadence of ethereal presence and then vanishing is super powerful. That's something that I brought back into my life. And I look at the things that I do for my work as sandcastles, and that I'm building this beautiful sandcastle until the next tide comes in and washes that away, and then I'll build a different sandcastle.
Everything has to come to an end at a certain point, which can be a shocking thing, but it can also be a reassuring thing, because, misery comes to an end. Hiding yourself comes to an end, There's a certain Zen art to that, right? That you can be in the moment of whatever it is, but not attached to it looking the way it is as it is this moment or in the next moment. It may change. So being able to continuously live in a moment without attachment and letting things just naturally go wherever they go, that's a powerful lesson in life. Absolutely it is. And my final question before we go on a quick break here is, what do you have to say to someone whose first time it is going to this event to prepare them for it?
Yeah, I never try to talk anybody into coming out there, because it's intense. It's environmentally intense. It can be very hot, very cold, windy, dusty. It's at elevation. It's at 4,000 feet. So there's a lot going on with your body while you're out there. So if you want to go out there, you have to be prepared for that. And you have to choose your story, so to speak, in terms of the intense activities that are going out there. So it's physically and it's intense psycho-emotionally, because you're going to be presented with experiences that you've never had in your life, and you have to choose your path through that. So what I do is, for our village, my daughter and I created a whole list of things that says, if you're going to go to Burning Man, here's some things to manage. And it just kind of goes through the list of how you prepare yourself physically to be out there with shelter, food, clothing, et cetera, and then how to navigate the intensity of the event itself.
Absolutely. So it's burning away a part of your old self, but it's also burning down everything around you.
Yeah, it very much is. And if you can get okay with that, it really makes a difference in your life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So with that, we're about halfway through, so I think it's time for a groove break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Sarah's novel, Playa Dust in My Soul, and how it encapsulates, Sarah's views on art, community, spirituality, and more. It's going to be a deep discussion that you don't want to miss. You're watching What's Going On with Dapper Don. Stay tuned.
Twinkle, twinkle, endless night, burning cold, a distant light.
Who are you? A question, a sky. Are you watching what you are?
Shatter the sky, rip it apart. Tell me your secrets, break my heart. Twinkle, twinkle, falling far. What are you, you little star? Twinkle, scream and roar. Shine your truth forevermore. Hanging high, a diamond flame. A billion whispers call your name. Do you beg or do you cry? Are you alone up in that sky? Pierce through the dark, tear me alive. Show me the fire, make me survive. Twinkle, twinkle, burning far. What are you, you raging star? Twinkle, break the core, shine your truth forevermore.
You're tuned in to What's Going On with Dapper Don. Don't touch that dial. For those of you just now tuning in, we just got through digging into Sarah's past and what keeps driving her to the Burning Man event, and how all of that plays into the freedom that she tries to live. Now it's time to talk about her seminal work, Playa Dust in My Soul. So tell me, you already kind of went into what aspects of your life inspired the creation of Playa Dust in My Soul, but what made you want to write a book about your experience?
Well, my initial experience was clearly pretty powerful for me. It was transformational in every aspect of my life. And I had this, within the first couple of years I was at Burning Man, I started to develop this idea for a story. And it was a story that would occur at Burning Man, and it would involve a number of people. And I wasn't at first really clear about what that story would look like. And eventually I put some structure around it, etc. And I didn't really feel like I was qualified to write a fiction novel. I'm a decent business writer or technical writer, but fiction seemed like a long way out of my abilities. So I tried to talk other people into writing the story, and I couldn't convince anybody. So eventually I had to take it on myself. The reason why I wanted to tell it is because Burning Man is such a rich environment, and there's so many possibilities that you can have for transformation out there, that I wanted to tell the story of Burning Man that wasn't spectacle. It was about what it's really like to live on the ground there and what you might go through as a person. And I eventually ended up creating 7 different characters that represented 7 different kinds of aspects of what it's like to be at Burning Man. One of the people works for the Burning Man organization. A couple of them are new and have never been out at Burning Man before. Some are longtime veterans that are building big things and offering things. And I wanted to give a real sense of what it's like as a lived experience to be at Burning Man from different perspectives. Additionally, each one, because the theme of the story is about belonging, each of the characters has a broken relationship with belonging, and they have to deal with it while they're out there.
You know, speaking of broken, I've heard you say before that the desert cracks people open. What does it reveal that normal life hides?
Great question. So there's a couple things there. One, when you're in a physically intense environment, so you're already kind of heightened in what you're dealing with. And when we're dealing with intensity, it reveals things about ourselves that we might not see in normal, everyday, comfortable life. But the other thing that happens out there is, because the culture is so radically different based on those 10 principles that we talked about earlier, the gift economy, taking down the walls of what people, that stay between people socially, participation, demanding that you step in and act, those things really drive people into new places. And it's very much like pulling yourself out of the water you swim in every day and looking at that water and realizing that that is not the only way you could live. So people get very experimental out of Burning Man because there isn't a lot of judgment about what you might try to do. So you might try to do things that you've never done before. I've seen straight people be gay for a week, gay people be straight for a week. I've seen, you might see somebody rolling in the dust, and any other part of your life you might judge it, and you look at them rolling in the dust and say, hey, I think I'm going to try that, see what it feels like. It's just a place that you can be very experimental without a lot of judgment.
Absolutely. It sounds like a place, I mean, if you got motherfuckers rolling in sand, then somebody walking in there being trans, of course, they're going to be like, yeah, you're a girl. Boring.
Exactly. Nobody cared.
So with writing a story, we often have to go into parts of ourselves that we don't want to visit. Were there any parts of yourself that you were uncomfortable with while writing this story?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that question. Nobody's asked me that question. The first couple of versions that I wrote the characters, especially the trans character, as more heroic or more kind of had her shit together. And I realized that I was doing a disservice to the story because I wasn't really digging into the things that I was uncomfortable with. So I made sure every character is broken in a way or is telling themselves lies. And all of those are, come from somewhere within me. I've certainly seen them in other people, and each of the characters are based on, people I've met, et cetera, et cetera. But every aspect of those characters, there's something of me in it. So I'll give you a couple of examples. The first character you meet is Ruben, and he's literally gotten out of prison after spending 4 years in prison, and he was exonerated of his crime and then bounced out with no place to go. 3 weeks later, he was at Burning Man building it out in the wildest place in the world. So completely dealing with having been institutionalized and then suddenly having incredible freedom and not knowing how to deal with that chaos. Another one of my characters, Harley, and you meet him early in the book, and he's a sculptor that's putting up a big installation, and he is grappling with his relationship with his native roots because he's half white, half native, and he had a really bad experience on the reservation. Both of those characters they're not me, of course, and they're very different, but I pulled various dark aspects from my past to create those characters.
Absolutely. And you can tell with just how the characters are even framed in this story. And I know that there is a little bit of romance in this story. Is that what somebody should read this story like? Like it's a romance, or do you think it's more of a coming of age story?
There is a bit of romance, but that is not the theme of the book. It's definitely about figuring out how you fit in community. So coming of age, maybe more like coming of who you are in community and dealing with that. And each of the characters has a different way. Some of them decent and some of them not so good based on where they are in life and what their strategies are. So it's really coming to grips with who am I in community and how do I put myself in community in a healthy way. And each one of these characters has a hard time of it as they go through the paces.
Absolutely. And I kind of want to talk about Ruben a little bit for a second. What would happiness look like for Ruben, someone newly freed from prison, just exonerated, wanting to redeem themselves?
Well, Ruben has layers of crap that he has buried himself under for many years, and he's basically a guy who's been on the run from himself for most of his adult life. And so prison, while, nobody would want to be in prison for him was a way to corral the chaos in himself. And he's also a recovering alcoholic and he got sober in prison. So he had this incredible structure around himself to keep him sober. And then suddenly he's bounced out into one of the most wild events, one of the most party events in the world. And he has to figure out how he's going to navigate that, given where he's coming from and the demons that are chasing him. And it wasn't intentional when I first started the book, but he becomes the heart and line of the book. You start with Ruben and you finish with Ruben, and his trajectory kind of pulls everything else along.
Interesting in what you said that, jail wasn't necessarily the most, he wasn't spreading his wings in jail, but it was keeping him sober, and there were a few other things it was establishing structure in. I know that you said earlier that your relationship with your family was about as healthy as it could be. It was beneficial to you. But when you finally stepped into that community of Burning Man, it just provided something different. Is that kind of how Ruben would have to learn to navigate?
Yeah. So, Ruben thrives on structure and he suddenly has no structure. And that's a terrifying place for him to be. And that is metaphorical because before I transitioned, life looked pretty straightforward. I would live this certain life that looked like what a white male would live in the world. I would be successful the way a white male would be successful in the world. There are certain things you need to hit there's a map for that. There is a guide for that. But when I transitioned, it was complete chaos. There was no roadmap for what it was to be a healthy trans woman in the world. So I hadn't thought about it till you asked me the question, but Ruben's landing on the playa and suddenly having no structure is very metaphorical to what I went through as I was, navigating with no roadmap.
And I really thought that was an interesting connection because I know that when writing a story and putting yourself out there, you can accidentally reveal parts of yourself you didn't even intend to reveal. That was a very unintentionally clever writing choice right there.
I out clevered myself because I didn't realize I did it until we had this conversation.
So tell me, what in your mind is redemption? Is it something that you earn or something you choose to believe in? Does it have anything to do with other people?
Yeah, I think redemption is a choice. I mean, if you think about all of our heroes, I mean, certainly what Gandhi was able to achieve and Martin Luther King was able to achieve, they are heroes of mine. They were also incredibly human with clay feet. So every hero that we have is always, there's a dark side of that person, and you have to take all of it. So for me, redemption is about what choices you make when faced with, whether you're going to go in one direction or the other. For example, in my daily life, when I'm talking with folks, especially when I'm meeting new folks, there's a fork in the road where I could avoid talking about being trans, or I could just address it head on. And very early on, I decided that if I'm going to be close to people, addressing it head on was the best way to do it, because it breaks down the wall between me and anybody else that might have questions about it. So I actively make those choices every day. And I think all of the characters in the book have to do that for themselves as well. If you read the book, you'll find that some of the characters, their redemption arc doesn't really take them to a great and positive place, but that was, it's kind of based on their karma, the strategies they had, how they were operating in life, what they had created beforehand. So, some of arcs didn't go so well. There was redemption in them, but not the kind of redemption that you would like to think would happen, the heroic redemption. Not everybody got a hero's journey.
Right. Right. No, I understand. And, speaking of, someone who is, trying to navigate and has to deal with that fork in the road. Let's talk a little bit about Harley, because you did something interesting with this character in that he's a creative, but he doesn't feel as free as other creatives.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're right. His history was as an accomplished artist, and then just utter failure. He just ruined his life. So when he eventually came back around and wanted to create this piece that he brought out to the playa, it was not necessarily this amazing act of creation for him. It turned out to be an amazing piece, but it wasn't for him. He didn't feel satisfied as that he had created this amazing piece. He was really trying to make peace with his past, and his only reason for building it was to try to deal with a past that he couldn't reconcile. And so it took him on a journey that it was unexpected.
And I did notice that. And, people go into all the time how, being creative is so freeing, but do you think the creation can just be another thing to hide behind to make yourself feel whole?
It's funny. I hang out with a lot of different kinds of artists because of my connection at Burning Man. And I never thought of myself as an artist till I completed this book. And I realized, oh, that's my art. Writing is my art. However, I did not have this great sense of creation satisfaction when I published the book. It was more like I finally birthed something that needed to come out, that reconciled so much of my complex personality and past. And I wanted to contribute it to the world for that fact, but it didn't necessarily give me the kind of satisfaction that you would imagine an artist would feel at the completion of rendering something into the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so that brings me to my next question then. Would you say Burning Man is a place of transformation or more a place of confrontation? And the transformation happens after.
It can be both. So certainly my first year, it was 99% confrontation And then the transformation really happened at the end and after I left for the many months afterwards. But there are people that go out there and kind of have that moment of confrontation that immediately turns into transformation that does its work throughout the event. I will say that confrontation is definitely part of the mix, and that is with the sand and the oyster that creates the pearl is
Right.
something is going to confront you while you're out there, and you're going to have to sort through what that confrontation means to you.
Absolutely. Well, that was just about all my major questions. And so now I just have to ask you, what is your final sort of piece of advice to the listeners who feel stuck in their own skin?
Yeah. So if you're stuck in your own skin, if you're satisfied, there's not much to do, right? If you have it all sorted out and you're being inside your own skin works for you, there's not much to work. But if you're feeling stuck, for me, it took transitioning to do it. Most people, it's not that dramatic, but there is something to confront. And what I can say is putting out in the world who you really are as an authentic person is an utterly satisfying experience. You get grounded, you get centered, you feel confident in who you are, you can be open and transparent. And while you may have negative repercussions, you can live with those repercussions. But that's the thing you need to know is you're going to get that deep satisfaction of being authentically who you are, and you're going to get some pushback. And that's just part of it. So people that, kind of step out of the lines of the quote unquote social norm and think that they're not going to have some repercussions for it. And I just don't see that as a realistic possibility in the world. So very much in support of people being who they really are. I will spend all day long with somebody who's trying to be who they are and just needs support. That said, we need to be realistic about what that's going to look like.
Absolutely. And that's a very nuanced take. And it's a lot more nuanced than a lot of people have, because, when self-acceptance is brought up, it's, you got to do this, you got to change this, you have to be this immediately different person. But for some people, their idea of success is just standing outside in nature, or, their idea of the American dream house is a closet in somebody's apartment, is like, and that's okay. That's okay.
I completely agree.
And finally, because I'm interested, where can they get Playa Dust in My Soul? And
Yeah, so it made it easy to find. I put up a website with Playa Dust in My Soul. It's all one word, Playa Dust in My Soul.
Playa Dust, not Playa. Playa.
Yeah, it's not Playa. No, it's Playa, and Playa is a Spanish word for beach. It's Playa, Playa. It's a Spanish word for beach. So it's Playa Dust in My Soul. And the reason I call it that is because it's dusty out there. It's anything you bring out there will have dust in it when you return. And there is that aspect of when Burning Man really takes you, it puts Playa Dust in your soul that is permanent. So it's playadustinmysoul.com. You'll find the book there. You'll find contact information for me if you want to talk to me. So that's the best place to go.
Absolutely. And I do want to thank you for coming on to the show tonight. You've been a wonderful guest, and I really cannot wait to put this episode out.
I'm shocked at how many things you have hit with me that made me really look into why I created the characters the way I did. And, this has been a great conversation. I feel like I'm getting off the therapist couch.
I try my best. I do a lot of deep research. I love doing deep research, and you have given me plenty of fun things to research and question. Anywho, that is all for today's show. If you like this episode, don't forget to like and subscribe. All of my socials, as well as Miss Marshall's website, will be linked in the description, as well as who helped put this episode together. Follow us everywhere so you don't miss a beat, and tune in next Sunday at 6:30 p.m. for an all-new What's Going On with Dapper Don. You don't want to miss what I have in store. Peace out.